Guy Dogner has been praying in this church for most of his life. But he might not be for much longer.
It is upsetting. Certainly that's what the members of the congregation feel, is a sense of betrayal and being really let down by the church at large.
St Albans in the rural community of Coonya is one of 76 Anglican churches in Tasmania being considered for sale, along with almost 30 other properties. The Anglican Church expects to net $20 million, with $8 million to be used to pay redress to survivors of sexual abuse.
I've lain awake night after night trying to think of a different way to do this. It's a terrible thing to have to do. We have this dark stain in our history, and not only do we share the great heritage of these buildings, we also share the terrible heritage of the things that were done to innocent children in our churches in the past.
Bishop Richard Condy says selling multiple properties was the fairest way to ensure all parishes contributed.
We're going to take 25% of the proceeds of sale to go to redress, but to allow the remainder of those funds to go back to the parishes so that we keep the good work of the church going.
The plan to sell off the buildings has been approved by the Anglican Synod, which represents all of the state's parishes.
I don't think they consulted with parishioners at all. I think everyone feels a need to be part of the redress process and happy to contribute to that, but it's to not be consulted in an organisation that actually should be conciliatory and consulting is really hard.
I think it'll look like...
But some in the Anglican congregation argue the church is much more than a physical building.
A bunch of people have come together, they're excited to share the good news of Jesus Christ, and we'll be planning...
On Tasmania's east coast, the new Southern Beaches Anglican Church operates without a dedicated building. It holds meetings in homes and community centres.
Are you doing all right?
Minister Chris Duss has moved to Tasmania from New South Wales to do something similar.
We want to move a little bit away from church being seen by the general public and even Christians too about being, just an hour or two on a Sunday, and it being about more of living life together.
Are you anywhere with a venue yet for getting people together?
Well, we've got some potential.
This church in Brighton will remain, but Chris Duss won't be using it.
So we're hoping that it'll freshen things up there. It's really the model that Jesus used and that the early church used too.
The latest census data shows Tasmania has the lowest rate of religious affiliation in the country. The number of people who identify as Anglican dropped 6% in 5 years. It still ranks as the #1 religion in the state, but almost twice as many people identified as having no religion.
Well, when you've got maybe a dozen people in a small rural community, they can't afford to pay a minister to be there on a Sunday. And so we've got to think really hard about how different models of ministry are going to work.
In that case, would these sales have needed to happen regardless of the demands of redress? Has redress just been used to start the process?
Redress hasn't been used to start the process, but the unsustainable parishes that have found themselves on the list for sale because they don't have a sustainable model of ministry wasn't going to be, is probably not going to be happening in the traditional way anyway.
Parishioners have until October to lodge an appeal if they want to save their church. In the town of Denali, locals have already formed a community group to fight the sale of the local church, or at least help buy it.
We've managed to get the new collection buckets available. I think probably the church doesn't want it, so that's end of story. So it's either going to be sold, and if it is sold, we would prefer it to be sold back to the community.
St Martin's Denali is no longer in use.
It's important to the community because it has been there for well over 100 years, for a start. It survived the catastrophic 2013 bushfires, and so after the bushfires it was used as a meeting place.
Back at St Albans, it's not just the church locals are worried about, but the accompanying cemetery.
The cemetery is being used. We had a burial here just a few weeks ago. We have
11, 12 forward bookings. I'm even booked to come here, as are my children.
Among those buried here are returned soldiers and 2 victims of the Port Arthur massacre. The state government is now reviewing the laws that protect cemeteries. For many in the community, the church is much more than just a structure on the hill.
There's a lot of people in this local community that may not necessarily go to church every Sunday or once a month, but when their time comes for a christening or a marriage or a funeral, Tasman community at large see St Albans as their pathway to God.